Hello, ladies. So this week I decided that I am just going to answer questions. I have a backlog of questions that people have asked that I haven't had a chance to answer yet. And I like to answer in content instead of in private because I know that if one person has the question, so does somebody else, right? And it's the same reason why I create content from my own stories, is because I know that if I've experienced it, so has somebody else, right? And so very, very important to share it like more publicly, right? That's how I look at it. So first question that I have on my backlog is about living with undiagnosed ADHD and being told constantly by medical professionals that it's just depression, and when they're not listening to you, kind of thing. So one of the biggest things that I discovered around my own ADHD is that it is very closely linked with my own depression and my tendencies towards depression. And so basically my response to this one is literally that, first of all, it's very common that it is mistaken, and no, it's not okay. It's not great. However, there are online assessments that you can do, like self-assess, to take these tests for ADHD. If you do that and then you bring your results to a doctor and it shows as you having ADHD, they're going to take you a little bit more seriously. So that is my number one recommendation, is go take a self-test, then bring it in, or find a new doctor if they're just an asshole, right? Okay, so obviously, I am not a medical practitioner. I cannot diagnose you with ADHD. So if you haven't had it diagnosed, if you're struggling to get it diagnosed, you're pretty sure you have it, highly recommend go online and get that diagnosed, even self-diagnosed, just so that you have something to go off of, that they can then maybe take you a little bit more seriously. So that is my recommendation there. I even have a website where you can go and take the test yourself and self-diagnose. So I will drop that link in the comments after I'm done with the live. But absolutely, depression is more common when you have ADHD, not less so. So it's not like an instead of thing. Absolutely can be both. So if your doctor says it's depression, I actually have a very good friend who was just recently diagnosed with ADHD, and she has been struggling with depression for years and struggling with finding the right medications for her depression. And then as soon as they put her on ADHD medication, it was like she leveled out. And so there is a difference. Absolutely. You cannot treat it the exact same way. Very, very important to get that diagnosis if you need the medication. Now, I'm not saying like yay or nay, one is better than the other, whether if you want to medicate, if you don't want to medicate, that is a personal choice. And okay. So let's see the next question. Next question was, they asked if it was normal, they noticed if they're doing housework or even doing, like, they're working at their job, they work better with AirPods in and doing whatever task they're working on, than if they don't, just because their mind is all over the place, kind of thing. And this is coming from the same person who was asking about being diagnosed with ADHD. So she hadn't confirmed that it was ADHD, and she was wondering if that was related. And I said, absolutely. This one, choosing intentional distraction over whatever pops into your head when you have ADHD is very, very powerful. It's super helpful. So giving your mind something to focus on aside from the boring task, right? The one you're not interested in, just is an intentional distraction. And so you choose it, something that's not going to take up all of your brain power, but something that will just keep you distracted enough to be able to focus. And that's for anyone anyone who doesn't have ADHD probably cannot grasp that concept, that you want to be distracted enough to be able to focus, but it is true. It is very, very powerful when you have ADHD to do that. And so here, I just want to point out that a lot of the time we question ourselves without confirmation from outside. But one of the biggest things that I have leaned into focusing on in the last 6 months, where I've started transitioning more into the spiritual realm and all of that kind of stuff in my business, is that we need to trust ourselves. And the way to trusting ourselves is leaning into our intuition and being able to, we get some sort of an idea like that where it's like, oh, I've noticed that when I listen to music while I'm working, I'm able to focus better. Or if I listen to a podcast or whatever, I'm able to focus better. Instead of like, and I don't mean this in any way in like a, you did wrong by asking, because to me, there's no stupid questions. There is no, you will never ever frustrate me or annoy me by asking a question. However, my goal is always to empower you to be able to rely on your own advice as much as you rely on mine, right? So that is a thing, absolutely use it deliberately, but also if you noticed it yourself, don't feel like you need to check in and make sure that that's an ADHD thing before you can allow it. Go with what feels good for you. Go with what resonates for you and what helps you in your life. It's going to empower you to succeed. So if you work better with music in your ear, work with music in your ear as long as it's allowed, right? Because you know that you are having a better output, you're more productive, you are better able to achieve what you're trying to achieve. And so trust yourself on that one, right? If that just works for you, even if you didn't have ADHD, oh my goodness, go with what works for you, right? Like there's no like one size fits all. So I just wanted to just also throw that out there. There's no shame in the fact that you asked, or if you feel still that you need to ask, if you're not ready to trust yourself. But I always try to encourage my clients, my audience, to lean in and learn to trust themselves and learn to be able to answer these questions themselves. So just by like their gut instinct, and I do help with that if you need help with that. Okay. Alex says, I'm so pleased I had my undiagnosed revelation this week. It feels amazing and I feel even more energized. Seriously, knowledge is power. 100%. You can't fix what you don't know, and you can't accept yourself fully when you don't know yourself fully, and you can't get help for something that is a struggle for you without knowing that is the root cause of that struggle, right? So absolutely, whether it's undiagnosed, self-diagnosed, like whatever, any knowledge is absolutely power. 100%, whether that is like, physical realm, spiritual realm, whatever, any knowledge is power. Anything that you learn is power. I'm all for lifelong. I've said this many, many times. I am a lifelong learner. I am always dabbling in a million different things because I love to learn. I will probably always have a coach, always have somebody on my side, right, that I'm learning from, because I know that there's no limit, right? There's no roof on how much I can learn and grow. And so I find that to be the most energizing and empowering and amazing thing is just continuing to learn and continuing to grow and continuing to rise, right? And it's so powerful and wonderful. So I love that. Okay, so yeah, intentional distraction instead of whatever pops into your head, absolutely, go for it. If you have ADHD and you haven't thought of trying that, try it. Very helpful. Now, let's see here. The next question is about the lack of the ability to stay focused or the inability to concentrate, which then makes you be unproductive. And they were asking about specifically, like they make lists and somehow nothing gets done. So first of all, if lists aren't your thing, you don't have to make lists, right? Just like putting that out there. If it doesn't work for you, don't do it. The other thing is, this is just such a suggestion, but some people think that they should have a list and then check off on the list, right? Other people, and I've learned about this one, it's not something that I do myself, but I have done it in the past, especially when I was really overwhelmed, to start accepting myself and realizing how much I was actually accomplishing. And I actually wrote a post about this the other day as well, where I was like, or I shared a post from like a year ago about this, where I was talking about how I had felt like I hadn't accomplished anything that day. It was 11 in the morning and I was like, I haven't gotten anything done. And I was able to like, wait a second, just stop. First of all, I slept in deliberately because I can't even remember the situation, but I had started my day later than normal. So of course I had done less than usual, but also when I actually listed out what I had done, it was an incredible amount. And this is one of the things where when I talk about productivity, a lot of the time it's recognizing that we're productive more than actually becoming more productive. So, or it's redirecting our focus for our productivity, because we're always accomplishing something, but sometimes we don't acknowledge it, right? Sometimes it's not what we meant to accomplish. Sometimes it's, you know, all of the little trivial things that we maintain, especially as moms. If you are a mother and you are trying to like keep the kids alive at home while maintaining the house, while running a business, all of these things, you're accomplishing a freaking lot, I guarantee it. But a lot of the time it feels like we haven't done anything because the house is still a mess, or because we didn't get supper cooked and on the table on time, or whatever. So readjusting your focus to realize what you have actually accomplished that day. And here's how to do it is, instead of making the list first and checking it off, start writing the list as you do things. And you can put a check mark beside them and whatever, if you just like love putting that check mark, which I totally get because I do too. But I did do this at one point. There was a point where like I needed to readjust my focus and understand that I actually was accomplishing a lot and being productive, even though it didn't feel like it. And the post that I shared from a year ago, because the list of things that I did was massive, and I had only been awake for a couple of hours, but it was like, it's all the little things, right? It's all the little things that you don't realize. And it's the really important things. They're small, but they're important. Like, I had woken my kids up with snuggles and love and calmness and patience and just, you know, that gentle awakening it's beautiful. I love doing that with my kids as often as I possibly can. It's a really good way to be present with your kids and get really in touch with them and build that relationship, right? But it also takes time. It's not a momentary thing. It's not like get up, flick on the lights, and then they get up and like there's no connection. Connection takes time. And so counting that connection time as having been productive, and it was very productive. When I spend that time with my kids in the morning, they're way less needy throughout the day. I've got one sitting right here. This is her level of need. Sorry. You know, she's cuddling me and she's fine. And like, you know, I was on a call earlier where she was wanting me to play with her with balloons, and I was like hitting balloons while I was on the call. But when I spend that intentional time with my kids first, I am able then to be so much more productive throughout the rest of the day because they are not desperately in need of attention from me, right? So that was just the first thing on my list that I had done. And I had this massive, massive list, and it was only like 2-3 hours that I had been working for. So to bring that back to your initial question, sometimes we need to actually decide that our sporadic, like especially if you have ADHD, if you are like jumping from task to task, it might feel like you haven't accomplished anything, but if you've done a little bit of all of those tasks, you have made progress. And so a big part is just becoming aware of the progress that you've made, right? So like I said, a really good way to do that is to write down as you go and like bring that list around with you, bring the pen, stick it in your mom bun, right? And just write it down as you go, or put it in your phone or whatever, but track every single little thing that you do, and you'll be like, holy crap, I did a ton. And so acknowledging that for yourself then gives you that like, okay, I am okay. I can accept me. I can accept that I am accomplishing. And then that boosts your productivity even more because you're just more confident, right? And so super, super powerful actually to do that for yourself. If it is a matter of like really struggling to stay focused and accomplish anything, and the list thing isn't working, and realizing that your productivity is just different than what you were looking for, if that isn't enough for you, you know, there are the options like looking into ADHD meds if you're not on them, but also, pardon me, my throat's starting to get dry. Also, if you, sometimes, again, it's like a perspective shift that you need to make for yourself is, what am I expecting myself to accomplish versus what can I reasonably accomplish, right? Or what do I feel like accomplishing? And a lot of the time, so I do like, last year I was doing them quarterly. This year I'm debating on how I want to do it, but I do planning sessions for moms in business, right? Where we plan out a quarter of your year in your business. And the beauty of the way that I do the planning is you have your list for the week, but each day you choose what you feel like doing. And so like leaning into that again, that alignment and what you feel like and what you are enjoying is so powerful in increasing your productivity. So that is my next recommendation. In the wider world, I find people either really get this or really don't, and that is okay, different strokes. And there are people who just are not, like my ex, not a lifelong learner. It was like, this is what we do until we die. Like there's no change. Change is not acceptable. So absolutely, there are all kinds of people, and I'm not even saying he's a bad person. He's not a bad person. We just did not jive, right? But yeah, so absolutely continue learning. And as far as the concentration and the productivity, I really do find that using that method of having your breakdown of tasks that need to be accomplished that week and then doing it by what you want to do, that has been a really, really powerful thing for myself and for my clients. So there is that free advice. That one is, and for anybody who is interested in learning how to plan for your business the way that I'm talking about, reach out. I haven't done one of those this year, and I'm starting to think about doing them on a private basis instead of as a group, just because timing never seems to work for everybody at once. So yeah, reach out if you are interested in that. Okay, next question. Natural tips on how to help deal and cope, and especially with children, how to help your ADHD children focus. Now, I'm gonna caveat, I am not the expert at ADHD children. I have ADHD children. I struggle with them. So I am not the expert at this. But going back to what I said earlier about having that intentional connection first, where then they are less needy, just like we need to fill our own cups, we need to fill our children's cups before we can expect a lot of ourselves or of them, right? And so especially with ADHD, if you do not fill your cup, if you do not, and by filling your cup, this does not always just mean having those bubble baths, having the time to yourself in the morning. As a mom, having the time to yourself in the morning is powerful. But it doesn't just mean that. Especially if you have ADHD, you're going to have, most likely, you're going to be multi-passionate. You're going to have so many things that you're interested in that it's hard to pick what to work on, right? But giving yourself a little bit of time for each of those things so that you've kind of touched on all of the pieces that feel like they're pulling you and distracting you, that is really powerful in then allowing you to, okay, now I've had my fun, I've done my exciting stuff, now I have the bandwidth to sit down and do that boring thing. And so I think it's really important, and I have found this helps with my kids as far as the question was around even spending 15 minutes on homework. It's really common for parents to think, okay, come home from school, sit down, do your homework, get that done, it's out of the way, and then you have the entire evening off kind of thing. And I have been prey to that in the past myself. But with an ADHD child, for example, and I really, really deeply got this finally this year because my son went into kindergarten, right? My oldest is now in grade 6, and we've been struggling with homework for a long time. But then I actually got to the point where I realized, you know what, she's doing great in school, even though we're not successfully completing her homework at night. And so I was like, you know what, don't care. We're not doing homework anymore. And she actually does do homework sometimes now, but taking that structure away for her of it being like, it has to be this way, changed the game. She was like, oh, okay. So now she does it when she's ready to do it. And I mean, her homework is she's in elementary school still, although she's old enough to be in junior high, but she is, her homework is practice math for 15 minutes, practice spelling for 15 minutes. It's very simple. So yeah, there's, sorry, I just got a message that threw me off a little bit. All good. But so finding what works for your child, because also, even if all of your kids have ADHD, they all have different personalities too. Okay. So my oldest, she's ADHD, but she's very much the distractible, not the hyper part. Right. And my son also ADHD, with him self-diagnosed. I'm not for putting my kids on medication, although I'm not judging anyone who does, because there are different levels of ADHD or different levels of all kinds of things. And if you need it, or if your child needs it, it's there for a reason, right? So, but I think for my kids, it's manageable. Anyways, My son is the hyperactive type of ADHD, right? And so I was thinking, like, with him going into school, oh my gosh, this is going to be awful. Like, he will not listen, he will not sit still, he will not, all of these things. And then I had a parent-teacher interview with his teacher, and she said that he's not at all a problem, that he sits, he listens, he needs to be reminded a couple of times sometimes or whatever, but that's normal for his age, of course, which I know. That, like, she's not seeing any evidence of ADHD whatsoever. And I was like, what? Because what I was experiencing at home was that he was coming home and he was just insane, like more than usual. He was bouncing off the walls. He was running around like crazy. And what I was able to then gather from that is that he's holding it in all day at school. He knows when he's safe to be himself, or when it's appropriate to be himself and to just let loose. And he knows when he needs to stop. And that was amazing to me, because I don't see him stop, right? I'm his safe space. So I see him crazy. And it's very rare that he slows down. If he does, it's because he like rammed his head into me to give me a hug and is like, I love you, you're beautiful, mama, like all of this stuff. But then he runs off again. Like, he's nuts. But anyway, so when he comes home from school, he's just held it in all day. He is not ready to sit down and do homework. And so usually for him, and I mean, he's in kindergarten, so like his homework is home reading. Like we're practicing reading, right? He's learning how to read. But we also read stories before bed. So I just combine the two. He doesn't even know he does homework. And so there's another option, right? Like, first of all, changing around the schedule, changing around the expectation, or changing around so that you are so that they don't even realize when they're doing it, right? Incorporating it into your daily life. His counting homework that he gets, all is done in our daily life. We go for walks, like count the number of birds that you see, count, like things like that. And I know this is very basic, again, because he's in kindergarten, but apply that at whatever level your kid is at, right? So they may need to, especially at the older grades, sit down and do all of this. But if your children are really young, you can probably incorporate it into your life by thinking outside the box. If you need some help with that, let me know. If you need like suggestions on how to deal with a specific situation, I'm always happy to help. Oh, hell yeah. Doesn't know its homework can work with adults? Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm going to go into a whole tangent if I go into that, so I'm not going to, but yeah, so hopefully that was helpful as far as like homework and getting the kids to focus. I believe, I can't remember if that mom doesn't have ADHD herself, but she's working with ADHD kids. But anyway, that is my best advice, is natural tips. If you don't want to go the medicated route, distraction is powerful. Just like choosing to distract yourself with the music to be able to focus, like I was saying earlier. And that can also apply with kids. Sometimes listening to music for ADHD kids while they do their homework, we think as adults like, oh, that's not going to be productive, but it can actually be really helpful. So thinking outside the box, letting your expectations change, and kind of tricking them into it, right? Okay, next question. I don't think I'm going to be able to get to all of these today. I talk too much, but that's okay, because I know that it helps to really be able to understand like what that looks like in real life, right? So not enough hours in a day, hyper focused, but with kids, it's constant distraction, pivot. Even the best laid plans and intentions get blown out of the water, overthinking everything to the point I want to run away from my kids to breathe, but also trust no one with them. Okay, so first of all, I guess I kind of mumbled that one. So basically the question is like, how do you manage to get things done when you've got, like, you want to hyper focus? And this is a big thing with ADHD, right? You get into this hyper focus, but you feel like there's just not enough hours because you just want to focus on this one thing. And your kids are like, no, look at this, look at that, over here. And you are easily distracted even when you're hyper focused. And it's really easy to get really frustrated and even angry when you're hyper focused and you get distracted. So, and then the overthinking, they're saying they overthink everything. Well, that is like the planning part. It's almost more fun to plan than to actually execute, right? And so like this mom said, it's almost like she wants to run away from her kids to breathe, but also doesn't trust anyone with them. I get that so much. I became an entrepreneur, started my own business, I think a little bit over 10 years ago, because I wanted to stay home with my kids, because even I was taking my daughter to my sister, and of course I trusted her with her, But I still knew that my sister raised her kids a little bit differently than I would raise my own, and I wanted to be the one raising my child. I wanted her to be learning from me the morals, the values, all of the things that I wanted my children to grow up with. And so, but with that automatically comes the overwhelmment of, I never, ever, ever get away from my kids. And when you are, there are great relationships where somebody is then able to give you that break and they expect it. They know that that's normal. They, they're ready and willing to support that with no coercion, right? No convincing. I know in particular, this mom is not in that boat, and neither was I. I did not have that support. It was like, what are you talking about? You need a break. You're at home all day. And I would get the derogatory things. And this is a separate issue entirely, but it was like, you don't do anything. You sit around. And it didn't matter that I cleaned everything, cooked everything, all of it, and was running a day home full of toddlers, and our house was still clean, and I still, was whatever I could go on about. But I didn't have that support to have that alone time. And actually, now that we have separated, now I get alone time. And I miss my kids like crazy, and I hate when they're gone, but it's so healthy, right? It's so important. And actually a big reason why we ended up splitting is because I started demanding that alone time, and I was making him take the kids on his own. And he just acted like it was so selfish, right? And so wanting to run away from your kids, like, oh my gosh, do not be embarrassed to say this, first of all. Like, I need a break. I want to be away from my children. I go and try to hide in my room. My 2-year-old finds me like that. I try to go to the bathroom. My 2-year-old finds me like that. I walk out of the room and she's like, Mama, come back. And so I get it. I get this on such a deep level. And especially when you want to be able to use your ADHD as like a superpower and hyper focus and just barrel through stuff, it can be so hard when you've got your young kids at home with you. And so, yes, the best laid plans and intentions get blown out of the water. Oh, so much. And I want you to know, first of all, that this still happens to me. But here's the thing. With how I plan, it is so flexible that they can't mess it up. They can't. It's just like, okay, we're moving on to this now, and then we're going to go this way. And we have way more of a flow to our days. And so again, this is about getting into alignment with yourself, figuring out what you really want, prioritizing a little bit differently than what maybe most people would think is how you should prioritize, or maybe not even most people, but like your stereotypical where it's like, get your work done first, work first, play later, that whole like, I don't know what you would call that even, just whatever, it's a saying. But if a lot of people really resist when I talk about doing the fun stuff first and then doing the work later, but it's so much more effective when you fill your own cup and then you fill your kids' cups and you play and you enjoy your life, and then you're like, okay, got that all out of my system, and they've got it out of their system, and then you do it, or then you sit down and get your work done. I know it's not what the patriarchy wants. It's not what they want. They want you to sit and work your butt off. And the problem is that work expands to fill the time that you give it. And so if you start working first thing in the morning and you're going to work until you're done and then play, you'll never be done. You'll never play. You will have a horrible, miserable existence, and it's no fun at all. And your kids are going to hate it, and they're going to be miserable, and they're going to be difficult for you, and they're going to be a lot more interruptive, and they're going to not care when you're like, you're being rude and stop interrupting and I'm on a call, or, and they're not going to care because you haven't given them a reason to care. You haven't shown them that they are most important to you, and they should be. And so you've given them your time first because they're number one, right? And I always say, like, they're first once they wake up. I'm first, then them. But they don't know that, right? Or my oldest knows, my 5-year-old even knows, but they don't really understand that, like, you're prioritizing yourself over them. But I know it's backwards. I know it's hard to wrap your mind around if you're so used to that notion of like all work, no play or your work has to be finished. Work will never finish. So play first. That is like my absolute number one. Play first. Give them that attention first. And it feels like when you first start out with this, when you switch over to this method, if you do it, it feels like they are never going to have enough. They are never going to get sick of playing with me. They're never going to let me be done. All of it. And you can start right from day one still getting some work done afterwards. And it's still going to be harder at the beginning. It is a learning curve for yourself, for your boundaries around it, and then also for your kids so that they can learn that when you set those boundaries, you actually mean them. And so the problem with when we're working first is that we've set this boundary of like, okay, you're gonna, sorry, my baby's getting sleepy. Are you tired? You've set this boundary of like, okay, when I'm done my work, I'll play with you. But because your work never ends, you never follow through. So they don't believe you anymore. And so it takes a while to build up their trust again when you switch this around and you decide, okay, I'm going to play first, but we're going to have like a timer going, say, and we're going to play for an hour and then I'm going to work. And you tell them this at the beginning and then that hour is up and they're like, no, we don't want you to go keep playing, keep playing, keep playing. And it's because they don't trust you because you haven't proved it to them yet. And so with that, then you have to say, okay, I'm going to work for this much time. And that might be 8 hours. It doesn't matter what the number is. But you say, I'm going to work for this much time and then I'm going to be done. And then you stick to your boundary. You stop working. And then you're available to them again. And very quickly, children are such quick learners. Very quickly, they will come to realize that you mean what you say and that you are a person of your word. And they will trust it. And an hour of play will suddenly be enough, you know, or even 15 minutes of play. Like I don't always spend an hour playing with my kids. It depends on the day, right? But just they know that you are giving them your undivided attention, that they're that important to you and that they came before work. And that's really important. So hopefully that answered that question. I know it doesn't give you like exact steps for getting all of your things done, but again, take a look at what you're expecting of yourself. Are you expecting an unreasonable amount of yourself? I'm gonna have to wrap this up here quick. So, and I still have like 4 or 5 more questions. So I think I'm gonna cut it off at that. For anyone watching the replay of this, feel free to drop your questions. You can drop them in the comments. You can post them in the group. This is a safe, inclusive environment. So don't be embarrassed. Don't be ashamed. And trust that if you have this problem, so does somebody else. And if you're still not comfortable to share, feel free to DM me directly. I am starting to answer questions in the DMs, like I said, because I want to be able to share because I know that it's affecting someone else too in the group if one person has the question. But you can ask me the question in the DMs and then I will tag you or I will send you replays or whatever to things that will answer your questions. So feel free to reach out at any time. I appreciate anybody who's watching this replay for taking your time out of your day. Your time is precious. I understand this very, very much. And I love you all. So thank you for being here. And I'm going to go take care of this little one now and I will talk to you soon.